All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Thursday, November 14th, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson, and we come out with these episodes Tuesday through Friday, dropping at noon each and every single day, and then we let the football dictate our schedule on Saturday, and we will release an immediate reaction show on Saturdays following each and every single Texas Longhorn football game. And it seems as though people have gravitated towards those. Those have consistently each weekend and week out been our highest numbers. Our highest interactions and engagement numbers have come from those immediate reactions. So we're not stopping those anytime soon. And then when basketball season gets going, you can guarantee we will probably have more immediate reactions, especially coming from the SEC and big time conference games when that starts becoming a more frequent thing. We've got a big time episode for you today. We are talking college football playoff talk. The Texas Longhorns are now the number 3 team in not only the AP poll, but also the College Football Committee poll as well. We're going to give you our keys to victory for the Texas Longhorns to have success in that Arkansas game in Fayetteville. Some news regarding that game as well. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's called foreshadowing. And then some Texas recruiting news and updates, whether that be the basketball world, the baseball world. National early signing period is right around the corner. And we've got some big news coming out of the baseball 2025 class as that recruiting period is now closing. So, Jake, give us the news, buddy boy. What's there's some big time news that you want to share with everybody ahead of the Arkansas-Texas game.
Yeah, I was listed as basically doubtful to going to the game a couple days ago. I am now active. I am going to the game in Fayetteville on Saturday. I'm actually going to meet my uncle there, and we're going to we have some pretty good seats on the Texas sideline for that game, close to kind of middle of the field, up about 20 or so rows. And so I'm very excited. It's the first game I've gone to this year. Second or probably like second or third game I've gone in the Sarkisian era. I did go to the game at Kansas State a couple years ago, which was actually his first big road win. And
against a ranked opponent.
And I believe was the start of their streak of not losing a road game. I believe that was right after it was sometime around early on after that Oklahoma State game. That was his first year, but
right.
It was their first big road win as far as being against a good opponent.
Season. Yeah, the 2022 season. Yeah.
And so that was, I know that was his first ranked road win. And that was kind of his first big moment on the road, and the Longhorns' first big moment on the road.
The Bijan Robinson Deuce Vaughn game.
Yeah. Bijan and Roschon both ate in that game. Deuce Vaughn was killing it through the air, and that was another one of those games where Texas got up big and then held on by the skin of their teeth at the end. It got very stressful, very uncomfortable in Manhattan towards the end. Hopefully this game's a little bit more comfortable. I was telling you earlier today, I was like, well, I'm either going to be driving home on Saturday very happy after the game for about 4 hours, or I'm going to have witnessed my first storm fielding live and just be absolutely miserable the whole way home.
Fun thing I haven't thought about, Jake, is this the highest ranked Texas team that you'll watch live in football?
No, I saw the
that's right.
I saw the Vince Young national championship team in College Station. I think I had mentioned this story or some week earlier, but I was pretty young then. But obviously old enough to remember watching all those games and that team. And as we were leaving the stadium, A&M fans are still doing their Colt chants and war hymns after losing the game by like 20. And I went to my dad. I was like, they lost. Why are they doing that? And then my dad just looked at me and went, "They're Aggies, son. That's what they do." So
that's what they do.
That's
and
one of my
you were
first
also
memories for A&M.
Yeah, you were also at the Big 12 championship game against Nebraska. And
all
Texas fans
very stressful.
Yeah, all Texas fans almost want to forget about that game. Very few bring that up in one of the best games that they'd seen, because it wasn't a very fun game. If you go back and look at the box score of that game in particular, It's ugly. It was all Ndamukong Suh essentially single-handedly keeping Nebraska in that game.
And Ndamukong Suh still gives me nightmares. That was the most individually dominant performance by any player in any sport I've ever seen live, and it was a defensive tackle doing it.
Yeah,
So
it goes to show how dominant Ndamukong Suh was in his heyday at Nebraska, because he nearly destroyed the Texas national championship hopes that season single-handedly. So, all right, Jake, let's jump into this thing. We've got some college football playoff talk, and I've got a rant just shoved in my back pocket. I'm going to take about a 2-minute period to step on my soapbox and address some things that I want to get off my chest. You say you have a segment that you want to take, so we're going to each take our time. We're going to gather ourselves here in a moment. First, let's get out some news about the college football playoff projections and give our takeaways, and then we will jump into those soapbox periods that we have. Jake, just first glances at the college football playoff projections that came out on Tuesday night. What were your overall takeaways? Me, honestly, Indiana should be ranked higher than Penn State. I still think they have them too low, even though they did push them up. I think they should have bumped up. I know they bumped up BYU and Indiana because they felt, or they heard all the voices chattering that they should have been bumped up higher. I still think those teams probably could get a little bit more respect, to be 100% honest with you. But that kind of leads into my soapbox a little bit. I don't want to jump the gun and get into it. What are your takes?
yeah, I mean, I just think Indiana and BYU are being disrespected. They're undefeated teams in power conferences. Indiana's only had one close game all season, which was against Michigan this past week. Other than that, they've blown out everyone. I'd have them above Texas even. You look at Texas, and I know there's been a lot of talk, and I'm sure that might be part of your rant, because I do think Texas they're getting respected in the polls, but some of the talk on social media is getting a little outrageous when people talk about Texas. But I wouldn't have an issue with an Indiana and a BYU being above Texas, quite frankly, just because they haven't lost. And I think BYU has a pretty good resume. They have a win against SMU, who is just outside of the playoff standings right now. And then another thing that kind of stood out to me was just Boise State dropping. Even though they won their game, I know is a little closer than it should be, but every single team in the rankings has had games that have been closer than they should be, other than maybe Texas. Texas has blown out pretty much everyone.
I think everybody would point to Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt. So one game against a team that was ranked at the time, beat Alabama. And is a decent team. That's their only remotely close game. But Penn State, they've had several close games. I don't know. I don't understand the Penn State ranking.
I don't understand the Penn State ranking at all, to be completely honest with you. I would have them in the Miami range, and I'd had Miami even push back even further, to be completely honest with you. I get why they're there. But at number 9, I don't really get it or see it. They've been slipping and stubbing their toe. They finally tripped over the roadblock or the obstacle that was in their way. Instead of just limping and lugging over it, they finally tripped it for the first time this season. But it had been a sign of things to come for quite a while with Miami. I think Alabama is starting to get hot at the right time. I think Ole Miss is starting to get hot at the right time. I don't mind them being in the playoffs. As if you asked me right now who looks the most like a playoff team, I would have Alabama and Ole Miss as one of my top 12 teams. Jake, if you were ranking this, aside from where the teams are you putting any teams that are currently on the outside looking in, and then who would you replace those teams with if you were ranking the top 12 and deciding your playoffs?
So I'm going to preface mine with this is I consider Boise State in because they would be in as it sits right now. So Boise State's, I guess, fine where they are because they're in. At the end of the day, that's really all that matters. But SMU would be in. Take out Georgia, or Ole Miss, or
Georgia would technically not be in terms of the actual tournament. They'd be the first team out.
That is true, because if you put SMU at 12. I just think I think results matter at the end of the day, and SMU is 8-1 with one loss to the number 6 team in the country. I I just think they should be in with that one loss. I would probably move Alabama out. They have a loss to Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
They've had several games where they've skated by. I know they got the hot hand, but what you do in the middle of the season, what you do at the start of the season still matters. They
It does.
still have those 2 losses on their resume.
You can point to Notre Dame in that instance. That loss is still haunting them, from week 2 against Northern Illinois. Like that.
And they've
should.
been pretty dominant since then too.
But it should. That Northern Illinois game should penalize them to where they are not going to host a playoff game unless chaos happens in front of them and they rely on other teams to lose. Like that should matter. What you do in week 1 should matter just as much as what happens in week 12, week 13, week 14 down the road.
Yeah. And so really there's just, I think the placement of some of the teams is messed up, but at the end of the day, these are standings as they sit now, and a lot of this is going to work itself out.
You still have Georgia playing Tennessee. Those 2 teams still have to battle it out. You still have other teams that are playing against each other, and obviously we have conference championship games. So, I mean, this SMU Miami talk is going to get settled on the field if all things stand right now.
Yeah, and so that's the good thing, I think, is a lot of this stuff is just going to sort itself out. This has been an abnormally crazy season in college football, in my opinion. I can't think of a season. I mean, you can talk about that 2007 season, but this is crazier in a standpoint of just how many like really top talented teams have really random losses. And then there's a 12-team playoff. So it's in the 14 playoff. You just be like, well, Georgia's out, Bama's out, Ole Miss, unless they win the SEC title, they're out. Tennessee, Georgia would be a for sure elimination game for Tennessee. But with the 12-team playoff, it just kind of causes this chaos to amplify. Because you're going to get a lot of 2-loss teams in the playoffs. And originally, I thought start of the year wasn't that crazy to think of a 3-loss team getting in, but because of the way things have shaked out, that is not going to happen this year. It could in the future, but this year is just not that year because there's so many 2-loss teams that have really talented teams with a lot of really good wins. Ole Miss, potentially Tennessee if they lose to Georgia this weekend. And it's going to be interesting to see how the committee kind of sorts it out as we go. But for rankings this week, I just don't think it's representative of what the actual playoff is going to look like because a lot of these teams play each other and a lot of this stuff is going to sort itself out. But what's going to be interesting is what do they do with an Indiana or BYU if they lose one game? Do they boot them out? And how that will work out. Because I have a feeling BYU's due to drop one at some point. In Indiana, if they beat Ohio State, I think they're just in.
And here's so I would agree with I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get settled, get on my soapbox, okay? Because I'm about ready to go here.
This is the Tanner don't jump. Segment.
Yeah, essentially, I'm taking a little bit of a lead by Jake here, and I'm gonna just go ahead and get into it. But we need to zoom out a little bit and remember why these college football playoffs started in the first place. It was to give teams an opportunity to win a national championship that otherwise did not without a playoff system. That was at least the reason for me as to why these teams should be in or have an opportunity to play. So if you're going to continually rank, and not only that, you get teams like a BYU, you get teams like an SMU, you get teams even in Indiana who's been in the Big Ten forever. You get teams that were in G5 conferences. They're like, okay, we're not going to have an opportunity to get in. Let's jump up. Let's promote ourselves and get into a Power 4 conference. And then once they do that, they're going to run the table and go undefeated in conference play. They may not play all the top teams. They may not play the Clemsons. They may not play the Miamis, but they're playing their conference. They don't get to choose their conference games. They win out, and you're still penalizing them by not putting them in. I'm an advocate for the small team, and I'm tired of just going based on what the logo is on the helmet. I'm sick of it. Indiana should be the number 2 team in the country right now. They have played in a conference in which has Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and yeah, it's a little top heavy. I understand, and no, they haven't had to play any of those teams. They have played Ohio State. I get that, or they're going to play Ohio State, and we'll see a lot then. But they beat a helmet team. They beat a Michigan. I don't care how bad Michigan is. That's a big game for Indiana, all right? SMU, same thing. They lost to BYU. BYU and SMU said, oh, we're in a G5 conference, so there's really no shot of us getting into these playoffs unless we win our conference and go undefeated and look like one of the best teams, and only one of us is going to get in. So we might as well jump into a Power 4 conference. Well, whenever you jump into a Power 4 conference, you're still not getting the respect because you don't have a U on your helmet, or you don't have an orange paw on your helmet, or you don't have a Seminole on your helmet. Why even go up to, why do exactly what you're asking them to do in the first place to win out in that conference if you're not going to give them an opportunity to play in it? That's why we did this. It's not because of revenue. It's not because, oh, we get to see Georgia host Penn State in a playoff game. That's not why we did this. That's not the reason for the 12-team playoff. The 12-team playoff was extended, so we gave teams like a TCU or gave teams that otherwise didn't have a great shot at getting in without a little bit of help or other teams losing, without having to win a conference championship, an opportunity to actually do this thing. A UCF is a perfect example. UCF they were a G5 team. They went to a Power 5 conference. If they go undefeated one year, there should be no debate on whether or not where they stand. They should get in. And if they have one loss, say, Jake, if BYU loses if they win out the regular season and they lose to, say, Colorado in the Big 12 championship game, do you think BYU's getting in as an undefeated regular season conference winner, but loses in the conference championship game? Do you think that they get in?
They won it in the 4-team. I think they would in the 12-team.
I honestly, I don't know.
Here's my argument.
I don't know.
Here's my argument back to you. We just saw TCU do that and get in a 4-team playoff. I really don't think they're going to allow that
in a year where the number 5 team in the country have like 3 losses.
True, but the committee has said they do not want to punish teams for losing a conference championship.
We'll
game.
see. We'll see if
we'll
SMU
see if they hold that to it, but I think BYU would get in that scenario.
Okay, if SMU gets to the conference championship and loses to Miami, but they win out and they lose to Miami, do you think a number 10 ranked SMU isn't going to drop 2 spots and not get in?
They would. That would be a second loss for them, to be fair.
Okay. In conference play, they would go undefeated, but yes, in the regular season, they would have 2 losses.
But the loss, your
SMU.
non-conference slate is still your non-conference. I mean, it's still a loss at the end of the day.
I agree. No, you're right. You're right.
But kind of to jump off your point here, and I'm going to kind of connect it to Texas. I've seen a lot of conversation about Texas not having a win against a currently ranked team, and talking about Texas's schedule being soft. You don't control your conference slate. Blame Florida, blame Oklahoma, blame Mississippi State, blame who else has been on their conference that's a somewhat significant name?
Kentucky. I mean,
even a Kentucky who's down, which, by the way, Kentucky has beat Ole Miss, Arkansas beat Tennessee, and they're about to play those games. And then they will play a ranked team at the end in A&M. But it doesn't matter. I just get so, and this is turning me into a rant here, but I got so sick and tired of for every year hearing about the argument back from me to SEC fans when they'd be like, well, the SEC's a gauntlet, blah, 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 blah. It would be, it's top heavy. You're talking about Alabama. You're talking about Georgia. You're talking about Auburn on the occasional year. You're talking about LSU every third year. You're talking about like a small conglomerate of teams in your conference that are really good, and some of them are only good from time to time, and really only 2 teams that are consistently good.
Bama and Georgia have been the only ones to win the SEC championship. And
Georgia would always have such an easy schedule.
Yeah.
And now Texas is in the SEC, is the only SEC team not to have scheduled an FCS opponent, and scheduled Michigan on the road. And yet all that we're hearing about with Texas is easy schedule, easy. I don't care if they in the season 1 loss, they're going to be a 3 seed or higher.
And like you said, blame Michigan for that. That's not Texas's fault. Blame Oklahoma for that. That's not Texas's fault for them having a crappy season.
And guess what? They've beaten the crap out of every single team that wasn't Vanderbilt or Georgia.
Yeah.
And everyone keeps saying Texas got dog walked in that game. It was a 1 possession game going into the 4th. They total yard every stat other than turnovers was fairly close. The only reason Georgia won that game was the field position they got off their turnovers versus the field position Texas got, and Texas's inability to move the ball in the first half. Texas lost the game. Georgia was the better team in that game. But I think people have revisionist history of how they just think about the halftime score, then they turned it off and forgot that it was a one possession game with Texas having all the momentum on a 3rd and 10 with Georgia backed up. And they get away with a blatant hold on the play to complete a pass, and then do a trick play the next play to get into field position. And those 2 plays essentially won Georgia the game. If not, Texas probably comes back and win that game because the offense was rolling in the second half and they had all the momentum. I'm tired of hearing Texas got dominated. Texas got dog walked. It was a 1 possession game going into the 4th quarter.
Right. No, I'm with you. And Jake,
I didn't mean to
go
go on my own rant, which isn't even the
small
rant I wanted to say.
No, yeah. Go get on yours. You're already talking about Georgia.
Yeah, I'm already talking about Georgia. So I'm just going to make this short and sweet. I don't know if any of you saw and I'm sure many of you did, the Georgia player who probably never touches the field that was celebrating with some Ole Miss fans after the game on the field that were apparently a childhood friend or something along those lines, which 2 things can be true. It's a terrible look. He should not have done that.
And it's a really dumb thing to do.
It was dumb by him and it was stupid. But when you're a head coach that has had multiple players get arrested for drunk driving, for assault, you've had a literal death. I don't know if you want to call it a murder or a death and whatever from racing on a highway. And then when that happens, you go, well, they're young guys and they just, they made a bad decision and we're going to try to clean it up. And then when your player does that after a loss on the field, you go, what an idiot. Live on your press conference. The just 2 different examples where one is off the field stuff that's actually dangerous and hurts people and has taken someone's life versus someone doing something stupid with just celebrating with a childhood friend after they lost. To me, it's just like, okay, you're making the football more important than being a good person off the field. And I think it just shows a lot about the character of Kirby Smart. And it's why both you and I have agreed we would not choose Kirby Smart to lead the Texas program over Sarkisian, because I'd be embarrassed to have a head coach do that.
Yeah, at any rate. All right, Jake. We've got a little bit more of this show that we got to get into. Keys to victory. Let's just go ahead and jump into this. You got 3 keys to victory for the Texas Longhorns to beat the Arkansas Razorbacks. We'll go ahead and start with yours.
Yeah. I mean, first off, what stands out when you look at our Arkansas box scores and you've watched some of their games, most of the games they've lost have been because they turn over the ball more. They've outgained teams in several of their losses, and they've looked like the better team in several of their losses. And when they've lost those games, it's been because they turned the ball over. So having a good turnover margin is always important, but I think it's even more important in a game like this where you're going against a team that tends to turn over the ball and doesn't force many turnovers. If that flips in this game and Arkansas gets more turnovers than they give, that's a recipe for disaster for Texas. Second off, limit the big plays from the Arkansas offense. This defense has been really good at limiting big plays all year. This is probably the most explosive offense they've gone against, though, this year, which is weird to say because it's Arkansas, but they're one of the top offenses in the country by almost every statistical metric. And then my last key to victory is just going to be start fast. You're on the road. It's going to be a very hostile environment. You got lucky with it not being a night game, quite frankly. And I want to see them go out and not have a slow start. That doesn't necessarily start fast. Doesn't mean you have to be up 14-0. 10 minutes into the game. It just means that you look clean. Like the Florida game, they started fast. The offense didn't score on the first possession. They missed a field goal and everyone thought the sky was falling. The defense comes out, gets a stop, then the offense goes right down, or they have to convert a 4th and 1, but they still go down and end up scoring a touchdown.
From their own 24-yard line. Almost went 3 and out. Yeah.
And then they scored another touchdown, then it was 14-0, and then they proceeded to roll. So I just want to see them start clean and crisp, no penalties, no turnovers, and kind of avoid those types of things early on in the game.
And Jake, my 3 keys to victory is, I don't know who knows this, but Taylor Green and the Arkansas Razorbacks lead the FBS in fumbles this season. And Taylor Green, I believe, has 11 of those fumbles. So pressure and hit the quarterback early and often. You got to get there. And I'm talking this is a big game for Colin Simmons, Ethan Burt, Darren Sorrell, Baron Sorrell. This is a big game for the edge rushers. I would even like to see Anthony Hill get blitzed a little bit more. I know he's more your middle linebacker, sideline to sideline guy. I'd like to see some pressure up the middle from number 0, or even put him on the edge. He was a very good edge player his freshman year. I think you could put him back in that role for this game and apply that pressure, or keep him as a spy, keep Taylon Green within that pocket so your edge rushers can get home. Either way, pressure the quarterback, hit the quarterback, he'll lose the football. Pick on their secondary. They've got one of the worst passing defenses in the entire country. And Texas has a top 10 passing offense in the country. Regardless of what Texas fans would like to believe, this is a top 10 passing offense that Texas has. And get your wide receivers. Your wide receivers need to expose the secondary, and all Quinn has to do is get it within the vicinity of your wide receivers, and you should have a big game passing. And lastly, gang tackle and team pursuit. The Arkansas running back Jackson is back. He's a powerful runner. He's strong. He's a good, solid back. And we mentioned this earlier this week on our final thoughts on the Florida game going into the second half. Again, that second half, you're kind of just playing a vanilla defense. You're not really pressuring too much on the offense in terms of getting stops. This defense has been opportunistic when it comes to needing to get a stop and getting that stop. And I think I don't really have too much of an issue with the run game whenever Texas is trying to actually get the big lead in the first half. And so it's a matter of gang tackling, team tackling, getting there, and make sure your angles are good and just sound, and make sure that you're getting the runners to the ground. And if they get yards after first contact and they're getting 5 yards before they're even getting contact, that's where I see Texas having a little bit of a struggle bus in this game if they're able to establish that ground game the way Arkansas wants to.
Yeah, I mean, you look at good defenses around the country that can have a really bad game just because they miss tackles.
Yeah.
Look at A&M against South Carolina. That's the example that really stands out.
LSU versus Alabama.
LSU just sucks, but A&M I think is a legit defense, and they typically only have 3 to 5 missed tackles a game, I think was the average. Then against South Carolina, they had something like 24 missed tackles in that game.
Lubegate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Lubegate. There we go.
Yep.
I'd forgotten about that somehow.
Yep. Lubegate. That was the reason why. But so anyway, Jake, we'll give our final thoughts on tomorrow's episode, and we'll give final predictions for the Texas-Arkansas game. But before we go, we have a limited amount of time. I want to talk a little bit about Texas basketball and baseball, and how Texas baseball finished in recruiting. Texas basketball beat Chicago State, probably the worst college basketball team that you'll see play this year if you saw them play. 105-58. They were terrible. But this is not this is a get right, get the team gelling and meshing, get some chemistry. This is more of like the way I explained it to people on Twitter who was like, why are you even scheduling a team like this? I mean, there were legitimately questions about that. It's a team bonding experience. That's what it is. It's to get your guys on the same page, learn how to play with one another. In college basketball, it's a much different game. And you get 1 year to play with the squad that you have, essentially. Very rarely do you get 2 or 3 years of playing with the same squad. Between transfer portal, guys leaving early to the draft, and whatnot, this is a chance for your team to bond a little bit and have a good time out there on the court. Trey Johnson, he finished with 19 points. He only played for 22 minutes. And then Anima, I believe that's how you say his name. He had a fun night. He's one of the lower bench players, but he had a career-high 18 points. He was all over the glass and played a good game as well. So it's good to see some of the lower-tier depth players get some big minutes and then put up big numbers in the process.
Yeah, and fun fact, Texas actually plays the worst team in FBS coming up.
Oh,
Mississippi
perfect.
Valley State is, I believe, 134 out of 134 in KenPom rankings.
Right on.
And that's who they play next. But, I mean, I would say to people that talk about the schedule, I do wish Texas had a few more tough games scheduled. But at the same time, every single team schedules at least some games like this. The season's just too long. to have a bunch of crazy teams. I do hope Texas gets some more marquee matchups at Moody Center in the non-conference, especially now that you've moved out of the Big 12, where the conference schedules, it's still not going to be easy, but it's definitely not going to be like it was in the Big 12.
It's just such a bummer because you even had a Kentucky and Duke playing on a neutral court the other night. Man, it's like get these guys at Duke or at Kentucky for a big game. The environment is unreal. You're not going to get that type of environment. You're not going to get even March Madness energy and atmosphere out of a neutral sided court in November. You're just not going to.
It's what makes college sports special. And then one other thing, I don't know if we've mentioned yet on the college basketball side, but Texas did actually drop out of the rankings completely from that loss to Ohio State, which kind of surprised me because Ohio State was favored in that game. But Texas didn't look very good. I'm cool with it. It doesn't bother me. You don't need to be ranked right now.
Texas will have plenty of opportunities to get back in there.
Yeah, and right now we're just kind of on, and I'm kind of glad Texas has a lot of cupcakes right now, just because you're waiting for Mark to come back, and he's going to be probably your second best scorer on the team. So you're missing a pretty big piece right now, but Syracuse is right around the corner, coming up in just about a week on the 21st. I believe that game is, oh no, it looks like that is a neutral court game as well. Yeah, that is at the Barclays Center, which
is, I mean, it's almost a home game for Syracuse more than anything. So
yeah, and they travel well, but it's just so lame.
Yeah, I mean, it just overall it's lame. Jake, lastly, let's finish this episode up. Texas baseball recruiting, they finished the number 2 class in the 2025 class, and so congratulations, Coach Schlossnagel, already making his impact felt. Now, like you said, you reminded me, baseball recruiting's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, you got to wait to see who's going to go pro. Some of these guys that are committed, they commit to colleges, they get drafted in a top round or two, and they take the money and go pro. NIL can change that some, but at the end of the day, some of these guys from this class are going to go pro, but you typically end up still staying around the same class ranking. It doesn't change too much. Coaches are pretty aware when they're recruiting what guys are for sure going to go pro, and they try to make sure they supplement that by getting guys who are likely not going to go pro. And regardless, it just shows you the Schlossnagel effect. It's kind of revamped the Texas baseball program, which needs it because the SEC is terrifying in baseball. But it feels like the NIL is a little bit more back behind the Texas baseball program again. And people are just excited because they stole little brother's golden child that they all love so much, and then claimed that he had nothing to do with them making their first national title in any sport in forever.
It's funny how team and fan bases cope like that. The Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma situation, and now Venables is on the hot seat. And if he doesn't make a bowl game, he's liable to get fired. Now, I don't know if he will this offseason, but it could happen fairly quickly into the 2025 season if things don't get straightened out.
That would be the second biggest buyout in college football history.
Behind who,
they
Jake?
fire him? Behind Jimbo.
Oh,
so A&M and OU
Jimbo,
would have number 1 and number 2, the largest buy. And it's I think Jimbo's the highest with like 75 million. I think the second highest is like 15 million or 20 million.
Close. It's not even close.
Venables would be, I think it's like 45 million because they just extended him last year. They beat Texas and they extended him because of that.
They gave him a Super Bowl ring,
which is hilarious to me because that move could cost them tens of millions of dollars.
And a program that's already begging for money. Jake, before we go, I wanted to talk about the number 2 recruiting class in baseball. LSU has the number 1 recruiting class, SEC. Texas number 2, SEC. Vanderbilt number 3, SEC. Tennessee, SEC at number 4. Texas A&M number 5, SEC. Mississippi State, SEC at number 6. The top 6 are SEC teams. Then you have Virginia at number 7, Wake Forest at number 8, Ole Miss, SEC at number 9, and then Oklahoma State to round out the top 10. So
and those other teams not on that list, a lot of them still recruit pretty good.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. SEC baseball is what SEC football fans have claimed that they are for the last 10 years, but it's really the SEC baseball world that they're that dominant and that exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, we we've watched Texas under Pierce. The biggest thing about Pierce, even when he was making College World Series, their first stretch, they would get whipped by the
By the
SEC
SEC.
teams,
Yep.
especially in the regular season.
Even A&M.
Yeah, I mean A&M owned Pierce.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately why the move was made. You're going into your first year in the SEC. If Pierce would have stayed, it would have
be
been
ugly.
ugly this
It'd be
year. And now there's at least a little bit more hope going.
And you
into
wouldn't
it.
have the number 2 class in the 2025 class. I can tell you that much. So, all right, Jake, that's going to do it for this episode of All in Horns, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Please keep spreading the word. Keep interacting with the show. Keep our engagement up. We appreciate everything. Our keys to victory segment, I think, would be a perfect, car dealership sponsor. Keys to victory. I'm just putting that out into the world. If anybody wants to hook us up,
Lamborghini Austin, you want to hook us up with some Lambos?
Hey, our Bijan NIL deal is right here for the taking. We're cheap, baby. We're not even as nearly as expensive as a 5-star. I can tell you that much. We're like 1-star quality. So no, we appreciate everybody interacting with the show, all the support. We do appreciate it. We do love it. Again, these episodes drop Tuesday through Friday at 12 noon. Your little afternoon lunch fix for some Texas Longhorn talk. And then on Saturdays, we will give you the immediate reaction. Jake will be live from Fayetteville for our immediate reaction show. I don't know if he's going to have to hide out in the car to do the show. I don't know if he's going to stand outside the stadium. I don't know if he's going to storm the court butt naked and do the show live from the 50-yard line. I don't know what he's planning on doing, but we will have a show on Saturday despite him being at the game, especially because he's at the game. He might be in the locker room talking to Sark. I don't know what he's going to be doing, but we'll have a show for you on Saturday for sure. And
a lot of those
Jake,
would end up being me doing the show in a jailhouse. A lot of the things you just mentioned me doing.
I mean, it's not impossible. But all right, everybody, that is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. Welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.